Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into how modern conflicts are being fought on three totally distinct fronts. You've got high-stakes diplomacy, you've got unprecedented battlefields, and then there's this fierce war over the very nature of truth itself. You know, this quote from urban warfare expert John Spencer, it really just nails the challenge we're facing. We're looking at a global conflict that's not just fought with weapons, but with stories, where the facts themselves have become a battleground. This is about so much more than just one war. It's a fundamental clash of how people see the world. All right, so let's start on that first front, diplomacy. Because right now, two vastly different styles of leadership, two really opposing visions for the global order, are colliding head-on. So on one side, you have what French President Emmanuel Macron calls the coalition of volunteers. This is the way things have been done for a long time, right? The traditional model of building alliances. It brings together dozens of nations, both in Europe and outside, think Canada, Japan, Australia, all rallying around a common goal, supporting Ukraine and defending the idea of international law. Now, that whole coalition approach is a world away from this other, more transactional, deal-making style. Instead of leaning on big institutions like the UN or NATO, this other path is all about direct, one-on-one talks between powerful leaders. See, the goal isn't necessarily a durable peace that's built on a system of laws, but a productive outcome that just ends the fighting. And often, Europe is what's being talked about, not a key player sitting at the table. And this quote, it's such a fascinating peek into that deal-making mindset. It comes from a speculative Russian media report imagining a hypothetical 3-hour summit between Trump and Putin. And it just captures the whole vibe of this personal style. The idea here is that peace isn't brokered by committees or institutions, but it's hammered out directly between the big players, based on personal chemistry and just getting to a productive result. Okay, so let's shift gears to our second front, the physical battlefield. This is where we are seeing the very nature of modern warfare being rewritten in ways that military experts are saying are just completely new. Military analyst John Spencer argues that what's happening in Gaza is fundamentally different from any urban battle we've seen before. And it all starts with what he calls a prepared defense. The idea is, this isn't a city that just suddenly became a war zone. This is an urban space that was methodically, deliberately engineered for combat over almost 20 years. And the most incredible feature of this prepared defense is the sheer scale of the underground network. We're talking an estimated 300 to 400 miles of tunnels burrowed underneath cities, hospitals, schools. In fact, Spencer points out that this network is so extensive, it could, remarkably, physically house the entire civilian population of Gaza. So all this preparation creates this perfect storm of challenges that, according to Spencer, are just unprecedented in military history. First, you have subterranean warfare on a scale no one's ever seen. Second, the defender's mean strategy actually relies on using civilians as human shields. And third, with the border closed, the civilian population is basically trapped inside the war zone, unable to evacuate in the way we've seen in almost every other modern conflict. And that brings us to the third and final front, the war over truth. This is the battle that's not fought with bullets, but with data, with narratives, with ideology. It's a fight where our most basic beliefs are being put to the test. This information war becomes crystal clear when we look at the intense global debate over casualty statistics. The numbers themselves are a central weapon in this fight, but where they come from and what they actually mean is a huge point of contention. So on one side, you have the numbers from the Hamas-run health ministry, which provides a running daily count. These are the figures cited all over the world. But then, on the other side, you have analysts like John Spencer who point to some pretty big problems. They argue that counting bodies in real time in a war zone is basically impossible, that the lists don't separate fighters from civilians, and that they include deaths from all causes, not just military action, but also things like misfired rockets or even natural causes. The key takeaway is the very data being used to shape global opinion is itself a massive point of conflict. But you know, this fight over truth isn't just about data. It goes deeper, into our core beliefs and worldviews. And to really understand this ideological clash, some people are turning to a kind of surprising place, a fictional allegory that's been gaining a lot of traction online. The story goes like this. There's a conflict between a reform-minded pope who thinks the church has to adapt and meet the world halfway if it wants to survive, and a traditionalist bishop. The bishop argues that the mission is to hold the line, because if you compromise, the whole institution loses its soul. Now, this isn't really just about religion. It's being used as a mirror for this bigger global ideological struggle. It reflects that tension we see everywhere. Should nations and alliances adapt to a changing world, or should they hold the line on the principles they were founded on? And this powerful line from the story's traditionalist character, it just cuts right to the heart of that whole divide. It asks a really fundamental question that goes way beyond the story. Are institutions supposed to change to reflect the world, or are they supposed to stay the same in an effort to change the world? So, when you connect the dots between these three fronts, the diplomatic game, the new kind of battlefield, and the war over truth, you start to realize they aren't actually separate conflicts. They're all just different expressions of one single massive struggle over what kind of world order is going to define our future. And really, it all boils down to these two competing visions. On one hand, you have an order based on law, on treaties, on alliances, where countries' borders are respected and peace is negotiated by everyone together. And on the other hand, you have an order based purely on strength, the law of the strongest, where the winner dictates the terms, borders can be redrawn by force, and the great powers carve out their own spheres of influence. And that leaves us with the defining question of our time, doesn't it? When a war is being fought across diplomatic tables, on battlefields, and in our own information streams, who actually gets the power to shape the narrative, to define what's true, and to write the final story? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.